The perfect storm. Isabella Chen stared at her wedding dress hanging in the closet, its ivory silk catching the afternoon light that streamed through her bedroom window. In 3 days, she would walk down the aisle of St. Mary's Cathedral to marry David Rodriguez, the man she had loved for 4 years. The invitations had been sent, the flowers ordered, and the cake was being decorated with delicate sugar roses. Everything was perfect, or so she thought. Her phone buzzed with a text from her maid of honor. Carmen Torres. Final dress fitting in an hour? Can't wait to see you as a bride. Isabella smiled, but something felt off. David had been distant lately, taking mysterious phone calls and disappearing for hours without explanation. When she asked about it, he would brush off her concerns with a quick kiss and change the subject. That evening, as Isabella arranged the wedding favors in her living room, she heard David's key in the lock. He entered looking pale and troubled, his usually confident demeanor replaced by nervous energy. Instead of his typical warm greeting, he sat heavily on the couch across from her, avoiding eye contact. "Isabella, we need to talk," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Her heart began to race. Those 5 words never preceded good news. "What's wrong, David? You've been acting strange for weeks." He ran his hands through his dark hair, a gesture she recognized as his way of buying time when faced with difficult conversations. "Melissa is back in town." The name hit Isabella like a physical blow. Melissa Parker, David's ex-girlfriend from college, the one who broke his heart when she moved to Seattle 5 years ago. The woman David claimed he was completely over. The ghost from his past that Isabella had never worried about because she was supposedly ancient history. "Okay," Isabella said carefully, setting down the ribbon she had been tying. "And this affects us how?" David's silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally he looked up, his brown eyes filled with confusion and something that looked dangerously like longing. "I've been meeting with her, just to talk, to catch up. But Isabella, seeing her again has brought up feelings I thought were buried." The wedding favors scattered across the coffee table as Isabella stood abruptly. "You've been meeting with your ex-girlfriend behind my back? 3 days before our wedding? It's not what you think? Then tell me what it is, David, because from where I'm standing, looks like my fiancé has been having an emotional affair while I've been planning our future together." David's face crumpled with guilt. "I never meant for this to happen. Melissa reached out when she heard about our engagement through mutual friends. She said she needed closure, that she had things she never got to say. I thought I could handle it. Thought I was strong enough to see her as just a friend." Isabella felt the room spinning around her. The man who had proposed to her on a beach in Maui, who had spent countless hours planning their honeymoon in Italy, who had promised to love her forever, was now telling her he was confused about another. "Woman, are you calling off our wedding?" she asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in her chest. David looked at her with tortured eyes. "I don't know. I need time to figure out what I really want, Isabella. You deserve someone who is completely sure about you, who doesn't have doubts." The irony wasn't lost on her. He was breaking her heart while trying to spare her feelings. As she watched the man she loved fall apart in front of her, Isabella realized that their perfect love story was nothing more than an illusion, built on a foundation that cracked the moment his past walked back into their present. The unraveling the next morning, Isabella woke up on Carmen's couch with swollen eyes and a headache that felt like her skull was splitting apart. Her best friend sat beside her, holding a steaming cup of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had spent the night plotting revenge. "He's an idiot," Carmen said, without preamble, her Puerto Rican accent thickening with anger. "For years, Isabella, for years of your life, and he throws it away for some ghost from his past." Isabella accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "I keep thinking I'll wake up and this will all be a nightmare." "We have a wedding in 2 days, Carmen. 200 guests, a reception at the Hilton, a honeymoon booked in Tuscany. What did he say when you left last night? That he needs space to think. He's going to stay at his brother's place until he figures things out." Isabella's voice cracked. "He actually said he hopes we can still be friends someday." Carmen muttered something in Spanish that Isabella was grateful she couldn't translate. Before either of them could say more, Isabella's phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen, and her heart lurched with desperate hope that he was calling to say he'd made a terrible mistake. "Isabella, I'm sorry to do this over the phone, but I can't face you right now." His voice sounded hollow, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "I've made my decision. I can't marry you feeling the way I do about Melissa. It wouldn't be fair to either of us." The coffee mug slipped from Isabella's hands, shattering against Carmen's hardwood floor. "So that's it? You're choosing her?" "Choosing honesty. Melissa and I talked all night, and we both realized what we had was real. What we still have is real." Isabella felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. "David, please tell me you know she's married." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Isabella wondered if the call had dropped. When David finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "She said she's getting divorced, that her marriage was a mistake." "Her marriage was a mistake." Isabella's voice rose to a pitch that made Carmen wince. "What about our relationship?" "What? About the 4 years we spent building a life together?" "Isabella, I never wanted to hurt you." She hung up before he could finish the sentence. Her hands were shaking so badly that Carmen had to take the phone away from her. "Tell me everything you know about this, Melissa," Carmen said, her dark eyes flashing with determination through her tears. Isabella recounted what little David had shared about his college girlfriend. Melissa Parker, now 28, had been his first serious relationship. She was studying architecture when they dated, ambitious and beautiful, with long blonde hair and green eyes that David had once described as like looking into the ocean. She had broken up with him to pursue a job opportunity in Seattle, leaving him devastated for months. "So she's been in Seattle for 5 years, Carmen mused, pulling out her laptop. "Let's see what Ms. Melissa Parker has been up to." Isabella watched as her best friend's fingers flew across the keyboard, social media profiles and public records appearing on the screen. Within minutes, Carmen had found Melissa's Instagram account, LinkedIn profile, and most importantly, her wedding announcement from 2 years ago. "Look at this," Carmen said, turning the screen toward Isabella. "Melissa Parker married James Parker, yes. They had the same last name now. How cute in August 2 years ago. He's an architect too, works for a prestigious firm in Seattle. And look at these photos from just last month." The Instagram pictures showed Melissa and James at various social events, looking happy and successful. James was tall and handsome, with kind eyes and a warm smile. Every photo he looked at, his wife, like she was the center of his universe. "She's not getting divorced," Isabella whispered, the pieces falling into place. "She's lying to David, and he's too blind to see it." Carmen nodded grimly. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Isabella stared at the photos of Melissa's seemingly perfect life, thinking about James Parker's trusting smile and David's broken promises. An idea began to form in her mind, dangerous, maybe even cruel, but satisfying in a way that felt like justice. "I think," Isabella said slowly, "it's time for some honesty all around." The invitation. Isabella stood in her apartment, surrounded by 200 elegant wedding invitations that would never be sent to their intended purpose. The cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing seemed to mock her now, each one a reminder of dreams that had crumbled in less than 24 hours. Carmen sat cross-legged on the floor, helping her friend salvage what remained of a shattered future. "The catering is non-refundable," Carmen said, checking items off a list. But I managed to cancel the flowers and get half your deposit back." The church was surprisingly understanding, apparently. This happens more often than you'd think. Isabella barely heard her. She was holding one of the invitations, reading the words that had once filled her with joy. David Rodriguez and Isabella. "Chen requests the pleasure of your company as they unite in marriage." The irony wasn't lost on her that David's name came first. Perhaps it had always been about him. His choices, his feelings, his past catching up to their present. "What about calling all the guests?" Carmen asked gently. "I've been thinking about that," Isabella said, her voice taking on a tone that made Carmen look up sharply. "Maybe we don't call everyone." "What do you mean?" Isabella walked to her laptop and pulled up the information Carmen had gathered about James Parker. His business address, email, even his work phone number, everything was publicly available through his architectural firm's website. He looked like a genuinely good person, someone who deserved to know the truth about what his wife was doing behind his back. I mean, maybe some people deserve to get their invitation after all. Carmen's eyes widened as she understood. Isabella, are you sure about this? Once you send that, there's no taking it back. David destroyed our relationship for a lie. Is manipulating him while betraying her husband. James Parker is the only innocent person in this mess, and he's being made a fool of. Isabella's hands were steady now, her voice gaining strength. He deserves to know. Over the next hour, Isabella crafted a letter that would change everything. She wrote it by hand on her personal stationery, her usually neat cursive flowing, with purpose. Dear Mr. Parker, you don't know me, but I believe you deserve to know the truth about your wife. I was supposed to marry David Rodriguez tomorrow, but he called off our wedding to be with Melissa. They've been meeting secretly for weeks, and she's told him she's getting divorced. Based on your social media, this doesn't appear to be true. I'm not sending this to hurt you, but because I believe you have the right to know what's happening in your marriage. I've enclosed our wedding invitation as proof of the timeline. With sincere apologies for being the bearer of bad news, Isabella. Chun-Shi sealed the letter inside one of her wedding invitations, her hands trembling only slightly as she wrote James Parker's business address on the envelope. Carmen watched in silence, understanding that her friend needed to do this, needed to feel like she had some control in a situation that had left her powerless. Express delivery? Carmen asked quietly. Express delivery, Isabella confirmed. Next morning, while David and Melissa were presumably planning their reunion, Isabella and Carmen drove to the post office. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, weighted with consequences that would ripple through multiple lives. Isabella hesitated for just a moment at the mail slot. Wondering if she was about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. Then she thought about David's voice on the phone. So certain that Melissa was getting divorced, so ready to throw away their entire relationship based on lies and half-truths. She thought about James Parker's trusting smile in those Instagram photos, and how he had no idea that his marriage was being undermined by a woman who was playing both men like pawns in her personal chess game. You sure? Carmen asked one last. Isabella dropped the envelope into the slot, I'm sure. That afternoon, Isabella's phone rang. It was David, his voice strained and desperate. Isabella, Melissa's husband, showed up at her hotel. They're having some kind of confrontation, and she's blaming me for causing problems in her marriage. She says she never said she was getting divorced, that I misunderstood. Isabella felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. Did you misunderstand, David? Did you hear what you wanted to hear? I don't know anymore. Nothing makes sense. How did her husband even find out about us? Isabella looked at Carmen, who was listening to every word with barely concealed glee. Maybe, Isabella said carefully. Honesty has a way of surfacing, especially when people's lives are built on lies. David was quiet for a long moment. Isabella, I think I made a terrible mistake. Yes, she agreed. You did. But it's too late now, isn't it? After she hung up, Isabella felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Peace. The truth was finally out, and whatever happened next, at least. Everyone would be dealing with reality instead of illusions. The confrontation. James Parker sat in his rental car outside the Marriott downtown, staring at the wedding invitation that had arrived at his office that morning. The elegant script and formal wording seemed surreal against the backdrop of what he had just discovered about his wife. His hand shook slightly as he reread Isabella Chen's letter for the third time, each word cutting deeper than the last. He had tried calling Melissa repeatedly since receiving the package, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Her assistant at the Seattle firm claimed she was attending a conference, but James knew better now. The timeline in Isabella's letter matched perfectly with Melissa's sudden business trips and late night. Phone calls she claimed were work-related. Taking a deep breath, James walked into the hotel lobby. At the front desk, he smiled politely at the young clerk. I'm looking for my wife, Melissa Parker. She's staying here for a conference. Let me check our guest registry, the clerk said, typing efficiently. I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have anyone registered under that name. James's heart sank, even though he had expected this answer. Could you try Melissa Rodriguez? He asked, remembering the name from Isabella's letter. The clerk's expression shifted slightly. Oh, yes. Ms. Rodriguez is in room 412. Would you like me to call up? No, thank you. I'll surprise her. The elevator ride to the fourth floor felt endless. James had built his life on trust and honesty, values that seemed naive now in the face of his wife's deception. As he stood outside room 412, he could hear voices through the door. Melissa's laugh, light and carefree, followed by a man's deeper tones. He knocked firmly. The voices inside stopped abruptly. After a moment, footsteps approached the door. Who is it? Melissa's voice sounded strained. Your husband. The silence that followed was deafening. James heard whispered, urgent conversation before the door finally opened. Melissa stood there. In a hotel robe, her blonde hair disheveled, her green eyes wide with panic. Behind her, James could see a dark-haired man sitting on the bed, hastily pulling on a shirt. James, Melissa breathed. What are you doing here? He held up the wedding invitation. I received this today, along with a very enlightening letter from Isabella Chen. I think we need to talk. Melissa's face went pale. I can explain, Ken. You. James stepped into the room, his eyes moving to the man who was now standing awkwardly by the window. He must be David Rodriguez, the man my wife is supposedly getting divorced for. David looked stricken. Sir, I had no idea she was still married. She told me she told you she was getting divorced, James finished. Yes, I read about that. The funny thing is, Melissa never mentioned divorce to me. In fact, just last week she was planning our anniversary dinner for next month. Melissa's composure cracked. James, please let me explain. David and I have history. When I saw him again, all these old feelings came back and I got confused. Confused enough to let him call off his wedding for you. James's voice remained calm, but his hands were clenched at his sides. Confused enough to lie to both of us. David stepped forward, his face ashen. She's still married? Melissa, you said... I said I was considering divorce, Melissa snapped, her mask finally slipping. Completely. I never said it was finalized. You let me destroy my relationship with Isabella based on a lie? David's voice rose with anger and disbelief. She was going to be my wife, Melissa. We had a wedding planned for tomorrow. James looked between them, seeing clearly for the first time. So you used both of us. Kept your safety net with me, while pursuing your fantasy with him. Melissa's eyes filled with tears, but James noticed they seemed calculated rather than genuine. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I love you both, just in different ways. That's not how love works, James said quietly. Love is a choice, Melissa. Every day you choose to be honest, to be faithful, to put your partner first. Chose deception instead. David ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture Isabella had described. I gave up everything for you. Isabella was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away because I believed your lies. Both of your lives? Melissa's voice turned defensive. You both made your own choices. James pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. I've already called my lawyer. I'll be filing for divorce on Monday. You can keep whatever fantasy you've built here, but I won't be part of it anymore. As he turned to leave, David called out, Wait, the woman who sent you this letter, Isabella, she tried to warn you, didn't she? James nodded. She did. She could have just quietly moved on, but she chose to tell the truth instead. That takes real courage. More courage than either of us had, David said, his voice hollow with realization. James looked back at his wife one last time. She was crying now, but he felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound emptiness were his. Trust used to be, goodbye, Melissa. I hope whatever you thought you were gaining was worth what you've lost. As the hotel room door closed behind him, James heard David's voice rise in argument, but he didn't stop to listen. He had his own life to rebuild, starting with an honest foundation this time. Walking through the lobby, James thought about Isabella Chen, a woman he'd never met who had shown him more respect and honesty than his own wife. Tomorrow was supposed to be her wedding day, and instead, she was facing the wreckage of her own shattered dreams. But unlike him, she had chosen truth over comfortable lies. In the end, that would make all the difference.